Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Welcome to our special live event. We're going to have today a very interesting discussion on learning and development planning, led by this panel of experts. And I invite you to join as well to the interactive parts of it. My name is Dotan Tamir. I'm the CEO of Clickto, which is a live learning platform for organizations. So just a few words to give you an idea about Clickto before we get started with the panel. When we speak about L&D planning, there's a lot to consider, and here's an important one. While 90% of employees and managers prefer the experiential, group-based, expert-led learning style, the unfortunate reality is that with the resources available, you end up offering primarily self-directed courses. Have you ever thought about this gap? And is there any way to flip this? So that's exactly what Click2 platform is doing. It's like a marketplace. Think of it as like a marketplace of live training programs with facilitators and content from some of the top vendors. And the secret sauce is that Click2 is grouping together participants with similar roles from different companies into cohorts. So then you can enable each and every individual from your company to join a different program matched to their role and learning goals. So everything then is automated. You can actually offer dozens of different live programs and different options at a single click. But the major part of those live programs is the learning journey that is designed into the Click2 platform. That includes engaging Zoom sessions in small groups, peer learning where you can learn from one another, structured on-the-job practice, and an AI learning companion that actually assists along the way. And the journey is never complete without measuring the impact of the learning on the day-to-day work. So now you have one more piece to consider for your 2024 L&D toolkit, and especially as a one-stop shop for leadership development programs. Let's say your company has leaders at many different levels, and they all deserve a professional development opportunity this year. But how do you serve the different needs with the limited resources? And we're going to talk about it. I know that the panel is going to talk about all those keywords in this panel, but I'll leave that question half open. If you have that kind of challenge, let's continue the conversation. And now, without further ado, let's get into our main event of today. And I want to invite our host for today, Heli Nehama-Ozeri. Heli is the founder of Artemis OD. With over 15 years of experience, she leads an innovative leadership consulting firm dedicated to enhancing performance through cutting-edge strategies and experiential learning. Take it away.
Thank you, Dotan, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we'll have the privilege of hosting great speakers who bring a lot of experience in L&D, and they're here to share valuable insights and best practices on L&D planning for 2024. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Valentina Pribble, former senior L&D partner at Flex. Valentina has 7 years of experience in the L&D field and enjoys dabbling in all things L&D has to offer. A few of her favorites being LMS implementation, instructional design, and facilitation. In her most recent role as a senior L&D partner, she especially loved being involved in creating a leadership development roadmap. Next on our esteemed panel is Erin Remy. She currently works as a senior manager of learning experience at Vendasta, a tech company based in Saskatoon, Canada, bringing more than 4 years of experience in the world of L&D. And last but not least, we have Colby Morris, head of leadership development at Upbring. Colby is a leadership development specialist and LinkedIn top voice in leadership development. He has been developing leadership teams for over 20 years, as well as providing executive and consulting services. Colby is also the head of leadership development for the nonprofit Upbring, which specializes in child well-being. So on the agenda for today, we'll kick things off with a thought-provoking panel discussion. Following that, we'll transition into breakout rooms to continue the discussion with our speakers in a more intimate setting, allowing you to share your thoughts and questions. you will be able to choose the room that aligns best with your preferences and interests to make the most out of the experience. And finally, we'll reconvene for a short recap to share your insights from each room and wrap things up with a quick debrief from the time. So let's start the discussion. I'd like to start with you, Valentina. L&D traditionally starts the yearly planning with needs analysis and thinking of how we support business goals. This happens every year. So how is strategic planning for, let's say, 2023 different than planning for 2024?
Yeah, thanks, Helly. I would say kind of the two things that are top of mind for me are doing a lot with a little, and then also keeping in mind front and center the technology that is advancing very quickly and the tools that we have at our fingertips in order to make our jobs as L&D professionals much easier. And so when I mean doing a lot with a little, what I mean is people's time is really precious. So while virtual instructor-led or instructor-led training is typically perceived as being more engaging, it's also very expensive. It's expensive from the L&D side, and it's also expensive for our learners. And so how can we, as L&D professionals, create engaging experiences that are asynchronous? And so that might mean leveraging communication tools that exist within the org, like Slack, getting really clear about the behavior we're hoping to see learners do more of or differently or less of, whatever it might be. I think also identifying the right modality for whatever that behavior change that we've identified is. So if, virtual instructor-led or instructor-led is the right modality, it's extremely important to kind of paint the picture on why, so that leadership can be bought in on the really high expense that, those modalities typically bring. And so anywhere we can, I think it's also really important to identify learning opportunities that can occur in the flow of work. And so quick, short bursts, exactly when the learners need it.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And, I also think that other than the major technology changes we're seeing right now, maybe one more thing that can, be specific for 2024 is how uncertain everything is. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with, the common economy where it is, given layoffs, the ongoing wars, and things of that nature, there's a lot of uncertainty on how much will we have in terms of L&D budget or budget for the organization in general. And in fact, I was recently impacted by a 33% layoff at my previous organization. And so that's been kind of front and center for me. And as I, pursue the next opportunity and things of that nature, I'm definitely keeping front and center. How can I, as an L&D professional, be really clear about the value that L&D brings and how we as L&D professionals impact the bottom line most often indirectly. And so how can we kind of bring in the data points that we have access to from the HR side of the house that really, reflect all of the impact that we bring as L&D professionals?
Yeah, what kind of data do you think that can help us, strike the right balance between flexibility and strict planning when thinking about next year?
Yeah. So one example that comes to mind is in my previous role, one of the projects that I worked on was creating a manager development roadmap. And so as part of that, some of the data that I really looked into was what are the internal trends and external trends when it comes to leadership development. And so internally, we took a look at upward feedback. What are our people saying about the skills that their managers are lacking? And then externally, I was taking a look at the common leadership programs that are out there and then reconciling the two and identifying trends and unique, maybe skills that Flex, had, and also what are some common skills that, would be helpful to maybe use from external resources or be able to develop internally. And so I would say taking a look at those things and then also taking a look at engagement metrics and, turnover metrics and things of that nature, because we know that most often people leave because, of their leader, right? And so how can we create the most incredible leaders so that everyone else is excited to stay with the organization.
Thank you for that, Valentina. It was very insightful.
Yeah.
Moving to you, Erin. When planning for 2024, how do you think we can prioritize and strike the right balance between business as usual activities and exploring new innovative opportunities? We talked a little bit about AI with Valentina just a second ago. How do you strike the right balance?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that most folks in L&D can relate to. The idea that, oh, sometimes we want to build something shiny and new and it's exciting and people are just like super bought into it. But the reality is, as we build all these amazing programs, there's also the importance of maintenance overall, whether that's content maintenance from like an LMS core standpoint, or even just like program administration, more like the operational pieces. So one thing that our team's been taking into account as we start to plan for 2024 is actually having maintenance as a goal itself. Yes, it might not be the prettiest or the shiniest goal, but it's something that we need to prioritize in order to keep things running. And then that way we also ensure that there's visibility into what the team is doing, kind of tying back to what Valentina said about showing the real value of this function, but also visibility into kind of like, what does this team do? The number of times that I get asked the question, and just like colloquially by friends and family, so like, what does your day-to-day look like? I think this is still a relatively emerging profession, and the more that we can really demonstrate what we are doing, like the better that will be for our function overall. So now that we've taken business as usual activities into account when setting goals, whether that be for the year or for the quarter, the next step kind of becomes, how do you prioritize all the incoming tasks, whether that's things that you as like an L&D function have identified, whether that's through like needs analysis or collecting feedback, but then also kind of the push-pull that exists with stakeholders coming to you with like, oh, these are my problems, like they need to be prioritized against all your other things. So one thing that we found really helpful is the RICE exercise. I'm not sure if folks here are maybe familiar with it, but it's an exercise that we found really helpful in determining the impact of a project and kind of how many resources or how much time should be dedicated. So for those of you who are not familiar, RICE stands for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So reach really addresses the question of who benefits from this program or project or course or whatnot. Is this something that is going to be for a team of 5 people, or is this something that's going to have org-wide reach? That may determine whether you allocate more or maybe less resources to it. The second piece there is impact. So is this something that's going to drastically transform how you do things at your organization? Or is this something that would maybe have like a 10% change? Again, something else to keep in mind. The third piece here, and anyone who has partnered with subject matter experts, I think will be able to relate to this one, is the idea of confidence. So how confident are you that you are going to be able to achieve or accomplish this project without cross-functional commitment? So what I mean by that is, if I'm partnering with a subject matter expert and I don't necessarily get what I need from them or whatnot, how likely is it that I'm going to be able to achieve this goal? So that can be something to keep in mind there. And then lastly, the E stands for effort. So like, how long is this going to take? Is this a month long or maybe a longer than month project, or is this something that's maybe going to be knocked out in a week? So then the formula here, and I'll maybe drop it in the chat, is to take reach times impact times confidence. These are all rated on a scale of 1 to 5, and then divide it by effort. And the idea is that if you do this for every single project, then you'll have like relative scores, and then you can see which projects will be the most impactful.
I love it. This is so, accurate, because we want to create, opportunities for learning that move the needle and create very good impact for the organization. So I think this framework really helps to, you have so much data, so many, different things you need to do, and it helps you really focus. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Moving to Colby. When we were preparing for this conversation, Colby and I had a very interesting discussion around leadership. So, Colby, when planning for 2024, how do you address the shifting dynamics in leadership? Well, nowadays, individuals prioritize a people-first workplace, and we need, as L&D professionals, to bridge the generation gap between seasoned leaders and new leaders. So, how do you plan on addressing that?
So we're at a very unique crossroads when it comes to leadership. What I mean by that is, and I've been saying this a lot, more has changed in leadership in the last 3 years than has changed collectively in like the last 40. Why is that? Well, for my generation, you can see the white in the beard, when we had a really bad boss, we just had to stick with it and hope you found something else. And you lived in misery for however long that took. When COVID came along, it changed everything. It made people stop and reevaluate. Not just do I want to stay home and work, but who do I want to work for? Now that I've had this opportunity, if I don't want to go back to work, I may not. And here's the reason why. Because there's options now. I can go Uber, I can go DoorDash, I can go do whatever delivery, Amazon's, whatever, to bridge the gap, pay some bills while I'm trying to find something else. I don't have to stay and put up with a bad leader. Well, that has totally changed the dynamics because one, we have a lot of older leaders who are kind of set in their ways and they weren't a people first leader. And so they're having to learn this on the fly. And on the other hand, we have the young leaders who are coming in and have no mentors that they can fall back on and really learn from because those people didn't learn it. And so collectively, as a group, as a whole, as a world, we're figuring this out that it has to be people first from now on. Now, let me back up. That doesn't mean that it should not have been people first in the past. Absolutely, it should have. But the magnifying glass is on it now. If I don't like you and you're a poor leader, I'm not going to stay around. And that's going to change your retention rates. That's going to change everything. I heard a friend of mine, Christy Hoffman, she said 75% of the employee experience is the relationship with my leader. That's the latest statistic, 75%. So if I don't have that relationship, if I don't have that trust that I have a good leader, I'm not going to stick around because I can do something else. So what we're trying to do is, as leaders now, is start figuring out who can we mentor? How can we change? How do we reach these young leaders and pair them with someone else? We may have to pair them with someone outside of that particular division. They may have to go to another division to find the right mentor. But if we're going to make it stick, that's how we get there. And then we have to change how we deliver it. So it's a whole new change that we're having to look at as we move forward through 2024.
So you're basically saying that when we're planning our leadership development and mentoring programs, we shouldn't automatically think about our senior leaders as the mentors for these specific, young leaders, but, think outside of the box and make sure we want to see, someone that can mentor them for the specific behaviors that the organization needs right now, and maybe do a reverse mentoring where young people maybe mentor the seasoned leaders. So I think it's an interesting insight to look at leadership development from a different angle, for looking at 2024.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about culture. As you plan for 2024 with a cultural focus, how do you strategically involve and motivate leaders to take accountability as active partners in shaping budgeting or initiatives to make the most impact?
So as at Upbring, I really try to hone in on our leaders that they're responsible for the culture. If you think of Stephen Covey, he talks about the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. Your circle of concern would be the entire organization. Well, you're not going to change that. All you have is your circle of influence, and that's where you need to work. And so as we focus on changing the culture in your circle of influence, that's where you start seeing the difference. So if you start looking at, like, and Patrick Lencioni, he talks about organizational health, that's where that starts. And so as we start these budget talks for 2024, not only are we reminding them that they're responsible for culture, but we're saying, hey, what line items in your budget are you putting aside for culture development? Are you putting aside money for celebrations? Are you putting aside money for decorating, or are you putting aside money for swag, shirts, cups, whatever it is? Team development. What other learning development, what seminars, what are you trying to accomplish, and where is that proof in the pudding when I look at your budget and it says, hey, here it is. This is how committed I am. We're putting this amount of dollars into our culture for this particular work division. And that really drives it home, because now we're making sure that we are really, really honing in and holding these leaders responsible for developing their culture. You can't just talk about it. Now you've got a line item that says, we're invested. We're going to make this happen because we put the money aside for it. And in 2024, what does that look like? You're going to have to do some planning. You're going to have to figure out how much is going to go into there. But you also need to figure out, how am I going to appreciate my employees? Reverse engineer, how do my employees feel appreciated? And how much is it going to cost me to reinforce that with whatever I put in culture?
Yeah, I love that. I love that you put the responsibility and accountability on the leaders to think and plan for this. Usually I think in many organizations, we as L&D focus on needs analysis, and then we offer choices. And when we put the responsibility on our leaders and say, okay, here's the budget, please tell me how you're going to plan, how you're going to spend it, it really shifts and get them to be more accountable. So I really love it. Thank you, Colby.
Absolutely.
Moving back to you, Aaron, last question. I know you're very, very committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB. Could you share your strategic plans and initiatives for advancing these values with limited resources in 2024?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question. So this was something that was identified as a need within our organization, both from kind of the top level leadership as well as just from employee surveys, where we were able to gather a lot of data. And the request was always coming for learning or for training or for courses or for live sessions. So one thing that we leveraged as more of like a low cost option was we hosted a number of panels within our organization on topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So one of the ones that I'll highlight for you all here is we hosted a panel on neurodiversity in the workplace. So we had a few different folks within our organization come in and share their experiences of being neurodivergent at work and talk about some of the accommodations and support that they've received, as well as where people can go to learn more about it. And this ends up being a really low cost initiative or learning opportunity for many folks who might not have been familiar with what that meant. But we took this a step further. So we recorded the session, and then we also have had others in previous years, but we've taken those and we've now hosted them in our new learning management system and almost built content around these recordings. So now instead of it just being like, here's a recording from this session this one time, there's actual contextual information. So it's like, okay, like what is neurodiversity? What are maybe some of the different neurotypes? Like where can I go to learn more? And really just leveraging existing content is one approach we've taken for kind of keeping costs low. Something that we're looking to do as we move into 2024 is really thinking about almost DEIB within learning and development as two different buckets. So you have like the actual DEIB content piece where it's okay, like what do people want to learn? What skills do people need to learn? How do you have inclusive conversations? How do you address challenges that may come up and when people may disagree on different perspectives? Kind of those pieces. But then the other bucket here too has to do with the actual implementation. So like how are you as a facilitator or as an instructional designer designing content that is inclusive and relevant to everyone? For facilitation, for instance, that can look like having your pronouns. I know some of you might notice I have my pronouns listed here, so you know which pronouns I use and how to refer to me as. When you're thinking about instructional design, that means, okay, like do the images here, some of the content, can it be read by a screen reader for folks who may be visually impaired? So just kind of keeping these things in mind is another, I'd say, like very impactful way, but also like low cost effort to really advance DEIB as we move into next year. And I think the last thing I'll say on this too is there's a number of really great resources out there. So we don't need to reinvent all the content. There's a lot of great places that we can pull content from and act more so as content curators rather than like content builders, if you will.
I love that. And there's a very big trend on content that says, don't create, document. And I think the example you gave is exactly that, because we as, L&D professionals have very limited resources. And when we do something that is well, let's document it, let's build around it, and let's, create and curate the right content that is specifically for our organization for everyone to use it. So yeah,
absolutely. And yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I think what's also really nice too is it can be used like cross-divisionally. So for instance, our DEIB committee has established a list of kind of days that we're going to recognize or acknowledge, but that can now be filtered over to like corporate marketing. Will have access to that workplace experience. Like we have other different divisions that will benefit from having this almost like shared strategy on like what we're working towards. So it extends beyond L&D and the learning piece, which I think is really, really cool.
Thank you for that, Erin. Okay, so now we're going to have a chance to have a more intimate discussion with our panel speakers.
Good back.
I see smiles. I'd love to hear about your insights from your room discussions. So let's start with room number 1, Valentina. Anyone from the room, or Valentina, if you want to share your main insights from the discussion.
Yeah, I can definitely kick it off, and Orly did a wonderful job kind of keeping the discussion going as well. And so one of the things that we talked about was when it comes to kind of collecting metrics and identifying trends that we're noticing or the needs that exist, does anyone know of a really great tool that would help kind of filter through all of the data points and then create an output of the needs that exist? And so we weren't really able to come up with a really great solution, because a lot of times those kinds of things are done manually, especially in smaller organizations. And so that's one of the things that we were chatting about.
Okay, thank you for that. Room number 2, Erin.
Yeah, I'll maybe just see if there's someone from our room that wants to share before I hop in. I think Rodrigo's maybe still here. Loretta was a part of that conversation as well. Okay, if not, that's okay. I'm happy to chat. So we actually kicked things off by addressing the question in the chat of kind of the difference between all the different acronyms floating around. Some people will say like just DE and I. Some people will say DEIB and kind of add the belonging in there. Some people will have justice in there, so it becomes like JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. But the way that I kind of see them, and actually Dotan had a lot to add to in terms of how he's actually physically seen it written out, was that diversity, equity, and inclusion are the inputs, and then the belonging piece is the output. So you can have, again, diverse hiring practices, you can have equitable compensation practices, you can have inclusive facilitation, but at the end of the day, all of those things are working towards the same goal, which is having a workforce or an organization where everyone feels like they can show up as themselves and are really valued for all that they bring. So that was something that we chatted a lot about. And then we also had some questions about getting buy-in. So again, like how do you really get, I guess, apply incremental change over time? Who are key stakeholders to get involved? And kind of the idea of having champions, and that like DEIB is not owned by just one person. It's something that needs to be more so embedded into culture, and that can take time to build, but looking for those quick wins or those smaller initiatives. That's where we started in January, and this is where we got to in December. And then you kind of use the whole planning framework all over again to say, okay, now where do we want to get to next year? What are we hoping to improve upon or further refine?
Thank you, Erin. I like these insights. Colby's room, anyone want to share the insights, or Colby yourself?
I've been doing all the talking, so I'm gonna see if anybody wants to say something first.
I'm happy to. This is Lisa Connors. I just appreciated Colby sharing some of his best practices, in terms of, some of the things he was saying about, growing leaders. A couple key points that he made. One is that there's only 2 things leaders do: build relationships and repair relationships. So it's about being people-centered and having them really, lean into that part of leadership as being essential, especially since COVID kind of changed the expectation and the willingness of folks to continue to work under a bad boss and see themselves as having a lot more options now. If I have a bad boss, I just go, right? and talked about a few great resources and approaches. One is doing an onboarding new leader orientation with new leaders that extends over a period of time and, orients them to what leadership is and isn't in the company, and then actually matches them with himself or a mentor one-on-one for a period of time until they get it, so to speak. And talked about a resource, and I wrote it down, Colby, and now I lost the page. Quint, could you tell everybody about that resource?
Yeah, Quint Studer. Studer rounding is leader rounding, how to do your one-on-ones effectively. That speaks to the basic needs of an employee, what they need to feel at work. Quint's been doing that for a long time. It's a great resource. Yeah. Lisa, you said all that a lot better than I did. I should just let you talk.
I'm a good note taker.
Apparently. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Erin, you had your hands up.
Oh, sorry. I was just clapping at the idea of leaders only either build relationships or repair relationships. I thought that was really interesting.
Thanks.
Thank you for the insights. Anyone else want to add? We have a little bit of time, like 3 or 4 minutes. Anyone want to share any more insights or ask any more questions for our speakers?
In my group, Sharon had just started when we ran out of time. So Sharon, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, we'll be glad to carry on our conversation later on. So,
do you want to ask the question here, or do you want to continue later? Okay. Anyone else?
I will bring the question that we ask ourselves in our smaller group, and really curious about if you have any new way you found that is super productive to collect your organization needs towards planning 2024 and allocate the budget. And we know how comprehensive and massive and complex process it is. So anything new you learn in the last few years that working for you, I would love if anyone could share. Yeah.
One of the things, Orly, that I was thinking about as we were exiting the breakout room was in this time before we get into 2024, how can we start to measure the behaviors that we're trying to change? Where are they currently? And so kind of creating those benchmarks now, which doesn't answer the question about the tool, but how can we at least start to identify, okay, what are the behaviors that we're noticing that need to change or evolve or even stay the same? And how can we start measuring what that beginning benchmark is now, so that when we provide the learning experience in the new year, we can then also measure after the fact and demonstrate to the organization, like, here's how this initiative really impacted the bottom line. Here's the before, here's after. Of course, there's probably other factors that may have contributed, but we can clearly, state the before, the after, and how the learning experience impacted.
I love it, and I think it goes along, with sometimes the timing that we run organization engagement assessment. So, you want to know where you are and then take, what you see and the gaps that you find and address them also with learning and development, and then the before and after. But I like it. Yeah, thank you.
I can also add, I don't remember the name of the company, but I can check and send it to you. I know that there's a company that does a survey using AI tools, and it's like a bot that asks employees questions, and then they summarize everything and get you the insights from whatever it is that your employees are answering. So it's an AI-based tool. I can send it to you. I haven't experienced them professionally, personally, but I know they exist.
That would be nice. Yeah, I would love to look into that if it's focused on development and learning and development. That's cool. Thank you.
One thing that we found.
Oh,
sorry. Must say one thing that we found that really drove home the learning and development process was when we formalized a succession planning throughout the entire leadership, and really forced our leaders to have to focus in on the development of those people that are in the succession plan. So while it may be a little more streamlined and focus on fewer people, it did change the mindset of why we're doing the learning and development process, and really kind of brought it to the forefront of the brain. Oh, this is the learning and development we're talking about to increase our leaders' abilities, this, then you get into the whole thing about succession planning, right? What it does, but found that really formalized our process with everybody.
That's cool. So I want to add, from my end, what I'm doing as part of our feedback conversation, towards the end of the year, we have a full section on career development. So we do have those individual dialogues between managers and employees. And then, I can get some insight, for that, and I can work with this data. So that's another practice I can already share that's working well. But like the succession planning is also super powerful. Thank you.
I can speak a little bit too. So one thing that we've really been focused on in this last quarter is mapping role progression. So thinking about, okay, when you have like someone coming in more of an entry level role and then like their growth path or trajectory over the course of their time at the organization. And yeah, our HR team's done a really great job of pulling out the key competencies and skills required, as well as like expertise or product knowledge for each role. So we're planning, the goal is to use that data to map or measure performance. And then once we have an idea of, okay, like are either people kind of at where they need to be, or do they need support to get to where they need to, or are they ready to kind of move through that trajectory to the next role? That provides us with a lot of really great data too. So partner with your HR team and get that performance data. That'd be one other suggestion. Again, not a tool, but something else to keep in mind as a resource or a good data point.
Sharon, thank you all for a very insightful discussion.
So once again, thank you so much, Haley, Colby, Erin, Valentina, and thank you everybody who joined today. That was really fun. One last quick reminder that everybody here is invited for a conversation on providing live leadership programs to serve the needs of leaders at different levels in your company. We're all about community. By the way, we're going to have 2 community events. We have a Clickto L&D community that is open for people who want to engage with people, amazing people like you guys and everybody here. So this community will host an event in a week and a half, and I will send you an invitation to the community again as well in the next few days. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day, great evening, wherever you are, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.